This is an overview of Sage Intacct for construction. Sage Intacct is a purpose-built financial management system for Australian construction businesses. What we'll be looking at today is three key areas of the system. We'll firstly talk about the financial management capabilities of the platform. So essentially being a core finance system, there's a really strong general ledger that's able to handle complex organizational structures such as multiple entities, multi-currency, all in a single instance. And then on top of that, there's really deep project and job costing capability, which we'll get into to walk you through how you can actually set up your project and track your costs at a very granular level on that project. We'll then look at the reporting and automation that's available. The reporting spans both your core financial reporting, your P&L, your balance sheet at the whole organization level, but really importantly, being able to report down to the individual projects, both your financial reports and management reports or operational reports, and then some automation to help you get those reports to be as real time or near real time as possible. So let's get straight into it. So up on screen is my Sage Intacct environment we'll be walking through today. One of the key things to note is the platform out of the box is built to handle multiple entities in a single instance. And what that then means for you is if you're a multi-entity organization or you aspire to become a multi-entity organization, the platform will be able to scale with you and support that. And essentially, you've got this concept of a top level where you can start to perform organization-wide functionality. So typically, you would set up a common chart of accounts at this level so that your finance team just learn one chart of account that you use across all your entities. And it's also at this top level where you may opt to set up things like common customers or suppliers, meaning that you can then start to run reports to look at things like your total spend by suppliers at a group level or total revenue by customer at a group level as well. Now, it's also here where you may elect to do things like run your intercompany transactions across the entities and also prepare consolidated reports. Reporting is also a really fundamental part of the platform. And what a lot of our clients use their reporting here to do is combine the key KPIs onto centralized dashboards for different stakeholders. And that may be members of your finance system, your finance team, such as your AP, your AR, controller, and so forth. But really importantly, you can start to open this up to your operational colleagues as well. So such as your project managers and QSs, and let them log in and self-service with the reports that they need. So your finance team don't have to be downing tools to provide basic reports to your project team. Everyone can start to basically self-service with the reports that they're after. In terms of visualizations, there's different visualization tools available. Different types of graphs can be accommodated together with what Sage Intacct calls scorecards, which in my case, I'm looking at my revenue for the quarter, comparing that to a prior quarter, or you may be looking at things like actual costs versus budgets, or look at a month-on-month comparison, and so forth. Or you may also elect to look at a more traditional financial statement like a P&L report, financial ratios, balance sheets, and so forth. Okay, so really depending on who the user is of the particular dashboard. Now, what is important to note here is all of these reports and dashboards are configurable, so you can make them have the relevant KPI to that particular user. So in my case here for my controller, I want to get a more granular sense of my P&L performance. Hence, I have this P&L report that shows me a 12-month breakdown, and it's a lot more granular. But I'm also now tracking things like my revenue for the month and the cost of that revenue. I'm also tracking non-financial info that's important for us, such as number of active projects we have, our headcount. So any of those non-financial KPIs that are important for you to keep a good eye on, you can bring that into this finance system as well. Now, given their focus around financial management for a construction company, I'm going to switch gears and look at this particular project performance view. Being able to really get a good sense of how your projects are tracking is one of the key strengths of being able to bring in that project data into the same platform that your finance system lives in, and then get that real-time visibility. And what Intacct provides us here is the ability to see things like our revenue and cost and start to work out our profit margins on projects. And really importantly, we can then start to get this analysis down to an individual project view as well. So this is my list of all active projects. What I'm also then tracking is the same projects. I'm tracking attributes such as who the project manager is, the type of the project, the location of the project. And based off of all of those attributes, I can then start to group my projects. So by same project overview, I'm grouping it by the PM. So I can see individual PMs, portfolios. I'm also grouping it by the type of job. So I can start to see sub-job type portfolios. And what this then means is we can filter this down further to, instead of looking at all the projects, just look at specific projects. The way this is made possible is leveraging Sage Intacct's dimensional chart of accounts. Essentially, the way this works is when you set up the chart of accounts in Intacct, you'd be able to define the chart of accounts at the national account number level only. And instead of having a big raft of sub-accounts to track different types of costs or revenue, you can simply track those with dimensions. So in my case here, I have a dimension for my project. And then within the project, I also have dimensions for cost code and cost type. So what I'm able to now do is create a P&L report by project, create a project spend report by cost code or cost type, and start to get that really granular analytics. Now, you'll also note that other dimensions exist, such as your customers, vendors, and employees, meaning that the same way you can prepare a P&L report by project is the same way you can prepare a P&L report by customer or a spend report by supplier or employee. So you then start to have really powerful ways of doing analytics against your data or slicing and dicing your financials essentially. If you'd like to learn more about that, let us know in the comments and we'll be able to do a separate video just to deep dive on that dimensional GL structure. So from here, I'm looking at my project overview, and I just want to focus your attention to this particular project overview reports. Currently, I'm looking at all of my active projects, and using those dimensions, we can go ahead and filter this. And perhaps I just want to look at Doug's portfolio specifically. So by applying that filter, what now happens is all of my dashboard components are filtering down just to show me Doug's portfolio. And what I can now see here is my project overview is a shorter list. My project overview by PM, I'm now only seeing Doug's portfolio specifically. So that's an example of how you can then start to create one centralized view for all of your project managers. And when the individual PMs or QSs log in to look at their data set, they can just filter this down and look at their specific projects or portfolio. Everyone's there for comparing apples with apples. Let's just open this up again and look at all the projects. And I just want to draw your attention to the detail that I'm tracking on this project overview report. What I have is my project contracts. I then have ways of tracking my variations against those project contracts with the customer. And this then forms my total contract value. In terms of reporting time period, I'm actually reporting this from inception to date. So if you're the kind of business that runs multi-year projects, yeah, you're fully covered here. You can easily run these reports from inception to date and see the entire project's life cycle since it began. Now, similarly, I've got my budget or estimate on the cost side for this project and look at my contract value on the estimate. I can then start to see what our estimated profit margins are, both as a financial figure, as a percentage, ratio, and so forth. And once a project is in flight, you can then track your commitments against that project. So I've got my commitment book set up where I'm posting all my purchase orders and subcontracts. And as we start to incur actual costs, I'm then moving those commitments into my total cost in the form of AP invoices and subcontractor invoices. And then I'm also billing my client with progress claims, and I can then track my total billing here. So based off of that total cost, I'm now looking at what my true profit margin is on these jobs, both as a financial amount or as a percentage. So you can then start to see what that comparison looks like between what you'd estimated versus where your actual sit. And to help you with things like some of your cash flow planning, you may also decide to include information such as the percentage of your total cost that's been spent or your percentage of total contract value that's been billed. And this starts to paint a picture for you of cash flow. So you can then start to see how much of the project are you actually billing the client versus the cost you're incurring. So you can then start to see if there's a bit of a discrepancy where you're funding too much of that project. So looking through this, I guess the next question is, how do we actually get here? How do we track all of this granular detail against the project to give us this kind of analytics? So let's look at that next. To do that, I'm going to navigate to my projects area. Navigation is done through this menu. That's quite easy to find your way around. And then page that you frequent, you can also bookmark with like this. And then that makes them available from your shortcuts here. Okay. So let's come into my projects now. Right here from my list of projects, a couple of things I just want to flag. One, these list views are configurable, so you can actually easily adjust the kind of detail you'd like to see. What is also important to note is if you run projects that are multi-phase, you've got this ability to set up parent-child relationships across dimensions within Intacct, especially the project dimension. So in this particular example where we're doing a warehouse project and the warehouse consists of two separate buildings, we can actually have each of those buildings as its own sub-projects and then start to report and bill at the individual sub-project or run reports and look at the aggregate project as well. So you start to get a lot of flexibility in how you structure your projects. Now, looking through my list of projects here, I'm going to drill down into this particular project in Brisbane. Some of the key info just to flag here is you saw from the report we looked at, we're able to filter projects by the type of project, who the project manager is. So these are essentially the attributes that you can then use for reporting purposes. Some other key information to note is you can track things like who the customer is on the project for billing and reporting purposes, start and end date, and then really importantly, some key schedule that could be helpful for things like retention release, tracking things like your start date, project, practical completion date, actual end date, and so forth. You can track all of these key details and start to use them to not lose track of when you may be eligible to claim retention. All right, now the way we then set up the project is using cost codes. So you're able to set up your cost codes to essentially track your cost to whatever granular detail you'd require. This for you may be super simple, where it may just be a handful of components, or you may have a really granular structure for your cost codes. In this area, we also do support hierarchies. So for concrete, as an example, I've got some of these components. So the concrete is a header, and these are my actual cost code components within it. And then within each of these, if I look at my concrete reinforcement as an example, we know that there may be different costs that actually go into this. So you're able to break down the cost code into more granular cost types. So we know that for the reinforcement work, there's going to be an element of labor, there'll be some equipment hire, there'll be some subcontracted labor and other types of cost, material and so forth. So you can actually start to define the more granular breakdown of this cost code down into what we call cost types. So depending on the cost codes and cost type that you elect to use on your projects here, you can then go ahead and define your estimates. And the platform will allow you to bring in multiple estimates during the life of the project and then do comparisons against them. By looking at this particular estimate, what I now have is a really detailed breakdown of all of my estimate lines down to the cost type. So if I look at concrete, for example, all of my various concrete components, you can see them estimated down to the cost type level. And then as part of this, if you needed to track things like your quantity and unit of measure and descriptions or memos, you can definitely bring this in as well. If you already have a particular estimating tool that you're quite embedded with, you don't have to replace it. We can definitely explore how to bring data from that estimating tool into Sage Intacct. That's the estimate there. So once we've got our project defined, we've stipulated how we're going to accumulate cost against it and brought in our estimated costs, we can actually start to transact against that project. And for that case, I've got my purchasing commitment section here, where I can see a listing of all of my subcontracts and purchase orders against the project. So I've actually got quite a few transactions here. Here are my purchase orders and subcontracts. And for each of these, I can then start to see a really good 360-degree view of how they're tracking. An example here is this particular electrical services subcontractor, where we can see we had an original subcontract value of 9,000, and then a variation before we had, and then we had a total revised value of 12,000. We've also been invoiced for 9,000. We withheld 10% retention, and we can see how much we've paid and how much retention is still withheld. So this starts to give you a really good sense of how you're tracking at a granular level. And just like the rest of the reporting within Intacct, you've got drill down capability. So if I wanted to go in and see this particular subcontract as an example, I just click into the amount. So the number like that drills me down to the actual subcontract record. And from here, I can see my transaction line detail. So I can then see this goes down to the same level of detail of tracking the project, cost code, and cost type, meaning that I can then start to run reports and see estimated cost at this level of detail versus committed costs versus actual costs. So we can then see that was our original amount. There's been a change of an additional 3,000 to give us a total of 12. And we can also see the retention percentage that's being withheld here. So this would then automatically default on downstream transactions that are created, but the users could decide to override it if needed. So from here, we can also come in and see the change documents and drill down and open up the change order and look at it in more detail. So by clicking into this, you've got that drill down capability. And there's something that's available throughout the system with all the reports. You can always drill down and see the underlying transactional detail. So looking at this particular change order, while we're on the transaction record, we've got this collaboration feature that's available natively that allows us to send messages to colleagues within the business. So Doug is the PM on this. So we could send Doug a message to ask further clarifying questions as an example. And these collaborations now just form part of the transaction record. So instead of going out to email, you could actually start to have these conversations against the transaction record in the system. Now, also from the history, we can come in here and see all the invoices that have been raised and drill down to see that detail. So a really good 360-degree view right here from the project record, allowing you to drill down and see all the underlying detail. So as we talk about project cost, one of the key considerations now is how you actually bring those costs into the system. I'm going to walk you through the options that are available here. Firstly, Sage Intacct comes with a full procure to pay workflow built in. So you're able to have a procure to pay workflow that starts off from a requisition to a purchase order before you get to an actual invoice. And at any one of these stages, you could have different types of transactions available. So in my case, at the purchase order stage, I've got the PO and the variation to it. I'm also separating my subcontract and the variations to them. And then when I get to my invoice stage, I've also got my invoice and subcontracts and invoices and non-PO, non-subcontract related invoices. So different workflows for different types of transactions defined. And then as part of this, you can overlay an approval process to say that a PO would have to go to the PM to approve, And if it's above a certain dollar value, there could be multiple levels of approval hierarchy as well. So those are workflows that you get to define as part of the system configuration. Now, when you actually get your invoices in, you don't have to key those invoices in manually. Sage Intacct has native accounts payable automation that uses machine learning and artificial intelligence to start to learn patterns of your transactions and automate as much of the data entry on those transactions as possible. So the way this works is you would have an email address where you can forward invoices to for Sage Intacct to pick up, read, and key in for you. Or alternatively, you can also come in here and do an upload. And the upload does support quite a number of different file formats. Okay, so any of these file formats that are supported, so not just PDF, but images as well. But regardless of how those documents come in, because we're using machine learning in this instance, Sage will always create them in draft status. And this helps to keep the human in the loop. And what this now allows you to do is to review everything that the machine has done, check that the coding is correct before you ultimately proceed to posting that transaction. So from here, I can see this particular invoice has come in and it's been matched to a PO, and we can always drill down and see the detail. So let's go in and see the underlying information here. So this is the actual invoice. I've got this good split screen view where I can actually see the PDF copy of the transaction and my actual entry window. What it's done is it's read this document, found the PO number in the reference and matched it to a PO that I already have in the system. It's also gone ahead and found the line on the PO and matched it down, populated my cost code and cost type for me, my amounts, as well as GST. So what I can now do here is review this, and if I wanted to provide extra information, so perhaps something in the message field here or the reference, or maybe shipping dates I just want mentioned on this document, I can go ahead and provide that extra bit of context before I ultimately go ahead and post this transaction or submit it for approval. Okay, so this just takes away the need for you to manually key in your AP invoices. You could have this process fully automated. Now, looking through your vendors here, one of the key important components is compliance. So you may want to enforce vendor compliance and make sure that your vendors have the right level of insurance, as an example, and maybe use payment as a way of enforcing that. So to do that, we'll bring up my list of vendor compliance records here. All my vendors are set up at the top level. So let me open up my vendor compliance here. So instead of navigating to the actual vendor records to find the compliance, the vendor compliance is its own separate object, meaning that you can actually report on it on its own and pick up expiry dates quite easily from here. But they also links to the specific vendors that hold them. So Coastal Traffic is one of our subcontractors. I can see my vendor compliance from here. So these are all the various insurance policies that they have. I flagged the ones that we received, the ones that we haven't, and I'm also tracking the effective date and the expiration dates on these policies. So I can then start to define some things like, certain policies that are expired, we may want to prevent payment. So when we go through our payment process, we can actually flag this and either provide a warning or provide a hard stop of payment until that is rectified. Now, to give you a bit of a proactive approach in maintaining this, using the native reporting capabilities, you may set up a report to track things like your vendor compliance expirations. I have such an example here. And as part of setting up the report, I've added a list of filter parameters. So I could filter by the vendors, but I can also filter by the type of insurance. So maybe I just want to look, type of compliance. So maybe I just want to look at insurance that is expiring up until the end of this month. Hit preview. And all of these reports can be shared. So you can download into Excel, you can email them from the system here. And what I'm now seeing on my report here is each of my vendors. I can see all of the insurance policies, details behind them with drill down capability. and the effective and expiration dates against these policies. Okay, so you could schedule these reports as well. So without you even logging into the system, if this was handled by someone who wasn't logging into the system all the time, we could schedule a weekly or monthly report that goes out to them to alert them of vendor insurances that are about to expire. Okay. Now, coming back onto my project, let's look at the revenue side of things. Now that we've looked at how we set up the cost and track cost against a project, let's now look at the revenue side against these projects. The first component is your project contract. So you can have multiple contracts with a customer against these projects. And with each of these contracts, you're then able to stipulate your scheduler values. So this is my contract. I can see my original contract value. There is a process of tracking variations against these that then inform your total contract value. And the system will then keep track of how much you've billed from inception to date, retention withheld, and so forth. And scrolling down from here, I can now see my list of scheduler values. So these are all the components that I'm going to be billing the client for. I'm also stipulating how much retention is to be withheld here. And I can then see any variation that have been put in for each of these lines that then informs my revised value together with my total billed for each of these line items as well. Okay, so a really good 360-degree review here of my contract with the client. To go about your actual billing, this is quite easy to manage. You'd simply come into this section to generate an invoice. And then from here, you can pick up the type of transaction you'd like to create. So in my case, I'm going to create a contract invoice as of the end of June. Okay. And then I'm going to generate this off the back of a project contract, bill through to the end of June, and we'll pick up a QuickBooks again for this. We can have this so that they can be created in draft. You can preview before you actually go ahead and create the ultimate progress claim, or you can have it just go ahead and create this directly. So when you go in here to create a progress claim, one of the key things you'll see is the last application number. So you've done up to 7. So this would be application number 8. We can see your project contract summary. So total contract value, what you billed to date, retention withheld, the same detail you saw us looking at on the contract record. And then for each of these lines, what we're able to now do is stipulate the percent complete. So these lines are already 100% complete. So it's only this line that's still active. We may say we're now at 80% completion. And this calculates for us the value of the amount completed today that we'll be billing for. Or alternative, you can just enter the financial amount, and that also calculates the percentage for you. And then similarly, on the retention side, it would pick up the default retention of 10%, which you could overwrite if you needed to, and that overwrites the amount. Okay. Or you can overwrite the amount, and again, that overwrites the percentage. So the two work in tandem. So that is the process of generating your billing to your client, your progress claim, just based off of your percent completion, and it's all the way down to the line details or scheduler value that you have on your contract. So in summary, what we've looked at is Sage Intacct as our finance system first, meaning that we can start to look at multiple entities in a single instance, automated day-to-day accounting processes, particularly complex items like intercompany transactions, and then more importantly, being able to actually track your projects at a super granular level and get this visibility of how your projects are performing. Now, that is a lot of information that we've gone through. If you'd like to learn more, then feel free to get in touch with us. Visit our website, LimeLedger.com. We specialize in the implementation of financial management systems for construction businesses and work very closely with Sage Intacct. So if you'd like to learn more, visit our website or drop your questions or comments into the comment section below, and we'll get to them. Thank you.